he managed to take a loan for like 20 million crowns, right?
Mm.
Yeah, and then he used that to buy jeans abroad, and then he flooded the whole market of the whole country with jeans. Some people who figured it out quickly, they could make a lot of money. So
What caused the regulations to come into place? Was it the influence of other countries in Europe, where Czech was taking example from, or uh, how did it become stable? Like, what was the journey where the taxations came in place, the regulations came into place? Was it a push from the Europe, or was it initiative from Czech?
yeah, at the same time, there was foreign companies entering the market,
Mhm.
which were sort of teaching the people how stuff is normally done. So I think that kind of explains your earlier question about like, yeah, if the influence for regulation was coming from the outside. So yeah, in this sense, it kind of was.
So welcome, Victor and Lenka, again.
Hello.
We had the podcast like last month.
Mm.
It was very insightful. I got a feedback from a lot of our listeners. They got to learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
And in continuation to that, it would be nice to have something more.
One thing we could talk about is like, yeah, how business worked right after the fall of communism or after the revolution, because it was wild times. Like nobody at that time really knew how free market works, and people are figuring it out. And yeah, some people who figured it out quickly, they could make a lot of money. So earlier, my mom told me a story, and she told me that I have to share it with you. It's about a guy she knew that, yeah, basically he managed to take a loan for like 20 million crowns, right?
Mm.
Yeah, and then he used that to buy jeans abroad, and then he flooded the whole market of the whole country with jeans. He bought them for like $4 and then sold them for $20, and he made a lot of money like that. And so the point where he became successful was basically just getting the idea to take a loan, because at that point it's kind of money like 20 million. It was even like an unimaginable sum for most people, is what my mom says. And he had like the courage to do it, and it paid off in the end. And the whole idea about how he made his fortune was that he had the courage to ask a bank to give him a big loan, 20 million crowns. At that point, like, that was unimaginable sum for most people, but he had the courage to do it.
And in current times, if we ask how much would it be in terms of euros or dollars, just for reference?
20 million crowns, that would be like, I guess, $1 million or million euros, thereabouts, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big sum. And he was able to figure it out, or just he had the courage, basically, you're saying?
Yeah, because mom said at that point banks were basically giving loans out to everybody. You just had to like have a short, whatever business idea, and they didn't even look at it that much.
In today's time, you will call it a pitch, maybe?
Yeah, pitch, I guess, yeah. But I mean, really they didn't ask for much back then. Yeah, and so then what this guy did with these 20 millions was he bought the jeans abroad for $4 a pair, and then he sold them for like, how much? $20 a pair. Yeah, and he even said he felt a bit ashamed about like having this huge profit, but yeah.
In today's time, he would have been appreciated, because
yeah.
he's bringing margins and he's able to execute it in a very good way.
Yeah, I mean, probably you wouldn't be able to get these margins today, but like during communism, jeans were like very sought after and very hard to get. So it's how he was able to sell so many, because there was a huge demand at that point. And yeah, he made a lot of money. He reinvested it into some like prime real estate, and I think he's living a pretty good life today, right? Yeah.
Okay, the person is still there. Okay. And which year, if I may ask, are we talking about this story?
It's 92, right?
90, 92.
Oh, 90 or 91, something like that.
Okay.
But it was just like an example of what the free market was like.
Příklad odvahy.
Yeah, and of kind of like business courage. And so at that point also like everybody who had 2 or 3 million crowns, something like that, which is like $100,000, they were allowed to open their own bank. So I think at that point there's about 40 banks in the country. So yeah, I guess then like the difference between private investors and banks was kind of really vague because of that.
That's interesting.
Že tím vlastně nebyl moc rozdíl mezi nějakýma soukromýma investorama a bankama, že takhle tím mohl být banka. No. Yeah. So basically like everybody could be a bank, so like investors could be banks.
I mean, that was probably like a huge opportunity for someone who just rode on that wave, you know, or took a ride on that wave.
Yeah. Like some people figured it out and they made a lot of money, and most people were like left behind, confused about like you now have to learn about how free markets work.
Yeah, that's something probably you learn by doing. I think he was hustling and trying to do. Maybe he also had some failure initially. I'm not sure about that.
Měl napřed nějaký nezdary, nebo tomu se to podařilo?
Ne, to byl normálně úspěšný právník.
Oh yeah, so before that he was a lawyer, I guess.
Oh yeah. So he was a little bit established already, I can say, right?
Jo, pak mě napadl ještě ten příběh. So I remember the story of another guy, and I asked my mom about it. And this guy made his money like putting advertisements on bridges that go over highways.
Okay.
And because he had the know-how.
Nejen bridges, ale jako i panely postavili.
And also like just big boards and billboards next to billboards next to the highway. Because during the communist time he was working for railways, and so he could also travel abroad, and then he noticed this kind of advertisements there, and so then he knew like, oh yeah, this may be something I can do in my country. And at that point there were no laws about advertisements or about making advertising contracts, so he was able to get a contract from the government organization that takes care of the highways. They gave him contract for 50 years. So then he was able to.
He was very lucky in that case.
Yeah, he was able to capitalize on that very well.
Yeah. It also raises another question in my head, like, how was the marketing in those times? Like, it's very different to what we are.
You mean in the times after revolution?
Yeah, after that.
Jak fungoval marketing?
No a pak začal
So basically marketing at that point didn't exist, and it was just beginning to exist in the country, and people didn't understand what the word is, and the first marketing that started was when people came from abroad and who had previous experience with that, and they started teaching it, and my mom attended one of the first schools, and that's where she learned about it.
Well, abroad you would mean like probably from some capitalist countries like America or...
This guy was from Switzerland, I think.
Ale to prostě třeba bylo...
Yeah, at the time there was like these first classes being given, but that was maybe like 30 people. And besides that, like people were just using their own like creativity and drive to come up with ideas for marketing. My mom says that like Czech people are very like creative and industrious, so it was something that was visible at the time.
Yeah. I can imagine. And if you talk about creative and industrialist, can you give some examples before the communist time? Because I think that's sort of a suppression or like an era where you were tied up in the system, but probably it comes from the history somewhere.
Do you want an example of the creativity when like marketing was started, or before in the communist times when it didn't exist? Like
Well, we start with the historical records before the communism,
Okay.
and where there are some examples of creativity and artists and marketing,
Oh,
may or may not be, and maybe uh, after the communist times, how did it shape?
Yeah, maybe I'll ask about like TV advertisements during communist times because I know they existed, but that could be so I asked my mom about advertisements during the communist times because I know there was like something on the TV, like that was like about products, but she told me like I cannot even call that an advertisement because
No.
it was just like maybe for one back then, like maybe like in a class of products there was one product and there was no alternatives to it, so I guess that then it's not really an advertisement.
What you're trying to say is like there was no competition.
So like yeah, Mama explains about this a bit, that like before the revolution, like people didn't know even some basic stuff about advertisement, like what is a product, what are highlights, what is target
Co je
demographic,
přidaná hodnota, to jsme vůbec...
what is added value and things like that. So yeah. So I guess that's where she's making her point, that like before then you cannot even call what was happening like advertisements.
But maybe we can say like those were the baby steps people were trying to figure out. Maybe they were not going by the rules or the standards or the quality, but still like they were hustling their way to get there at least.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking during communist times, I don't think we can really talk about the people. It was like government businesses like paying to have some spot made on TV, but you cannot really call that advertisement.
Okay.
But I think after the revolution, that's when you can talk about people hustling, and maybe we can ask about it.
I think what will be interesting to know is like in the current times there is a lot of startup culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to get funding. I mean, not that easy, I really don't want to say that, but at least compared to the old times, there are much more opportunities. If your idea is really solid and you're looking for some funds, you can easily approach VC or raise funds, or in some cases you can bootstrap and still go on, depending on where you are and what are you trying to do with the model. But it would be nice to compare the current times with how it used to be just after the communist times ended. It would be very interesting because that sort of marks the start of this whole a new thing as a revolution, and also it was starting from the scratch. So maybe there is a lot of principles and formats or styles we can learn and see that might have resemblance with what we do in the current times, or maybe not. So it would be nice to discuss.
You mean mainly in terms of like starting a business?
Yeah, starting, and also like how people were able to take it to the maturity. What was the rate of successes, and how seriously people would take it, and challenges, advantages. Advantages would be, I think, majorly lesser competition. But yeah, disadvantages would be also interesting to talk about. Like if someone is into business, what challenges he had to go. Not disadvantages, basically challenges. I want to say. I think that's better.
To explain a bit, like at that point it was not just new businesses starting, but they were like existing big businesses that previously were like government businesses, and they were being privatized, and lots of them, for example, got bankrupt because they're like the markets they were previously serving, like Russia and something, the markets dried up. Some of the businesses transformed. There were also opportunities for people maybe to like buy existing small businesses, like people could buy like bakeries or something. Then of course some people just started completely new businesses, but there was also a lot of people who like they didn't feel like they want to do business, or be entrepreneurs, and then they continued working in these existing businesses.
Yeah, so I can think of, there was a lot of capital already for some of the businesses which were getting transferred from the government to the private.
Yeah.
So
There was a whole process how it happened. The privatization is called coupon privatization, but yeah, it's like a whole topic. I don't know if we want to get into that right now.
maybe we can touch it at the surface level. It's because you mentioned it. It would be nice to know. So one can go and read a little bit, or maybe gives another clue for the next episode. Maybe.
Yeah. So the way it worked is that an organization was created that was called the
Fond národního
yeah,
majetku.
like Foundation of National Property or something like that.
Okay.
And basically they for every state business they like created coupons for every business. They created coupons, and each of the coupon corresponded to like a share in that business.
Yeah.
And then each person was given like 1,000 crowns worth of money to buy these coupons, which gave them like a share of 1,000 crowns with which they could buy the coupons, and each coupon gave you like a share in one of the company, so you could like decide for yourself which shares you want to buy. And and then you could also some people weren't interested in this too much, so then other people who maybe knew what they were doing a bit better could like buy the coupons from the other people who were not interested, and then get large shares in businesses. Also the problem was that like a lot of people didn't really understand what this meant or how it worked, so the people who understood, they had a big advantage, and you were also at advantage if you were able to guess like which businesses were going to be successful. So like for example, a lot of people like during communism, like the traditional big businesses, or like the big businesses during communism, because everything was planned economy, like a lot of focus was put on like steel working and mining and this kind of stuff. So maybe somebody came there with the mindset into the privatization that like, I'm going to buy these businesses because they're big, but then maybe some of them didn't survive the change to the free market. But some people were smart and they thought like, telecommunication is going to grow, probably like power is going to grow, and so I'm going to buy these coupons, and then they made a lot of money. There was another dimension to this, was that some of the businesses got sold abroad, and then maybe the new foreign owners, like some of them just like ruined the business and just like plundered it, and and some of them took good care of it. So if you had your coupons in the business that got sold abroad, and they took good care of it, then you made again your money. Like an example of where it went well is Škoda Auto, which was a car manufacturer.
Yeah.
It got sold to Germany, and it's now doing pretty well. So another thing is that there was a lot of capital in some of the state-run businesses. Like the country was doing relatively well with industry and these kinds of stuff. So some of the like leaders of these businesses were maybe more savvy, and they saw this privatization coming. What they were able to do was to, like before the privatization happened, they already
Sold.
Yeah, they already like moved some of the capital or assets away.
That sounds very much like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk in current times.
Yeah.
I think the principles are still the same.
Yeah, but I think there is, they kind of did that before it was allowed.
Maybe give a little bit of a background.
So like, there was, after the revolution, there was still like a lot of capital in the state businesses, because the country was doing like overall pretty well, like when it comes to industry and things like that. And so at that point, like you cannot say owners, but the people in charge of those businesses, if they were a bit savvy, they could already like see the privatization coming in advance. And some of them thought that they could already start taking some of the assets and moving them away, hiding them somewhere, and then keeping them for themselves, which I have to note was kind of illegal at that point because they were doing that before that was allowed. This process was kind of common, and so a name was created for that. It was called tunneling, and then later on in the history of our country there was a lot of let's say court cases about this, about trying to get these people putting these people on trial for basically just stealing some what was government assets and profiting from it.
I think if you compare it from today's time, I think a lot of strategy and approach, the way businesses think, they are always able to find their way out, right? For example, lowering your tax bracket, or maybe the right time to sell or buy. I think it all comes being into the market, having contacts and connections with government also, I guess, right? How relevant was it in those times?
Now I'm gonna answer for me, and then I'm gonna ask my mom. But I think back then, all of these rules didn't exist, so I would say right now it's more subtle, and back then it was really just you can do this tunnel, just move some assets away, and that's not very that's not a very sophisticated way to do crime, but a lot of people did that, a lot of people got away with it. Now I'm gonna ask my mom. Did you mention tax brackets and something else?
Yeah, I mean in general, the whole circle that goes for a company or a businessman, it's taxes, it's also about the market news. A lot of times you say what's going to happen, people can know it from internal sources.
Okay.
I mean that is sort of illegal as well in some ways if you see, but that's more around what I was asking.
I think mom said basically the same thing I'm trying to say. It's at that point there were no such thing as tax brackets and stuff like that. It was much more primitive. Maybe people took a loan and didn't repay it, or the tunneling. Really they just took the business asset and just moved them to their own account, or if they were more sophisticated, they take the business assets, move them to their own account, then use the money on their own account to create a bank, then take a loan from the bank, not pay it back, the bank goes bankrupt in the meantime, and they get to keep the money, so and money that's kind of legal at that point.
In today's time it would be tracked and would be called as a scam. I think back in this time it was at least hackable by the people, because maybe the database was not that mature. If someone has taken the loan and he is having the tunnel connections, he can do whatever he wants.
Kind of that. There were no rules for this in place, so people were finding loopholes and things like that, and loopholes really big holes at that point. Holes that are as big as a tunnel. There was just a lot of rules that are not even in place. So for example, nowadays if you're an entrepreneur, you're supposed to pay your own health insurance taxes. But back in the day there was no rule in place for that, so people who started doing business on their own, they didn't pay any health insurance taxes because there just was nowhere to pay them to, and there was a lot of things like that.
Yeah, makes sense. I think if I have to ask you,
ale tu péči dostávali jo.
Yeah, but you wouldn't pay for your healthcare, but you would still.
Že u nás je, že všichni platí a je to sounáležitost, jo, to jenom aby věděli.
Yeah, because in our country it's everybody, there's a public healthcare, basically everybody pays, and then you.
A všichni dostanou všechno.
Yeah. I think we are discussing more in the contrast what happened before communist time and after. But it stands very relevant. But I think if you have to I have an interesting take on that. Like if you have to see in today's time, where do you see like in the recent years or times something similar happened?
Oh, good.
Can you guess? Like
Can I guess? Not really.
I mean, it has always been.
Bitcoin and stuff. Yeah.
So
okay.
I mean, it's going in that direction. Like the things keep happening in the history, and it's just the course of time where that stands relevant. So till the time you are unregulated, till the time government has not regulated a certain set of assets, or maybe not really categorized as assets or some kind of protocols or certain kind of markets, they are not regulated. A lot of scams could be done, and the things like tunneling. So
Yeah.
I could really find a good overlap between what stories are there, which are real, fact based, and it keeps happening every few years or decades. I think decades is the right word to use, and it happens in some or the other way.
Yeah, it's a good analogy. Like instead of tunneling, you have like pump and dumps and rug pulls and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Jako bych řekl, že dneska je něco podobného se děje v těch kryptoměnách. A no já si to pak potom můžu říct, jakoby, jaký podvody se dějou zase tam. No.
And they also say like the biggest opportunity for the opportunists is in the unregulated markets.
Yeah.
You cannot really have bigger margins when the markets are regulated, because there are always checks, taxes, and things like that. I remember like Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies were not taken seriously. There was a point in the initial times, and government was completely not really paying attention at it. But now, if you see in the countries, there are taxes on every transaction, receiving, sending, and also holding the assets. It's very much in that line, and this kind of is like the wave which keeps happening, in some or the other form. So
yeah.
Also with the stock market, I think if you see in the 90s, in some of the countries it was unregulated, and a lot of insiders news, market manipulation, which are actually illegal in a broader sense, if you see, used to happen. And there are a few documentaries and scams you will probably read about it. I don't want to name any right now, but maybe for the coming episodes. But definitely like a man. I mean, you do need the knowledge of finance, to have this picture a little bit clear. But if it is a little bit of lesson, one has to take. They have to probably go back and understand the history or what happened, because even the stories can teach you a lot, I guess. So I think this is very, very knowledgeable and very interesting to know that this thing was kind of existent there.
Yeah, I think probably if you want to learn more, then there's like a lot of other countries to look at, like maybe other post-communist countries. They each have their like different story, I think. Of it.
So it's kind of repeating cycles, more or less, in different geographies as well. Are you trying to say like there was a similar pattern?
Yeah, I mean, so all the countries that had like kind of a switch from communism to free market, they had to go through something similar, and like some of them, like I don't know the details about a lot of it, but like they had to go through the process, and I think some of them went about it in a different ways a bit. Like so, my mom said now that like for example for East Germany, they united with the West Germany, so they didn't go through any of that. Hungary during communist times, they still had like entrepreneurship on a small scale was allowed. So for them it was not that much of a change. So yeah, that for them maybe it wasn't as radical as the change that happened in our country. Yeah. So my mom says that as far as she knows, like what happened in our country was like the biggest privatization that happened as far as she knows, that like there were a lot of big businesses, for example, were like one big state business, and then they got divided into, I don't know, 20 or more other businesses. Yeah, I don't know enough about this to like.
No, that's okay. I think it would be up to the listeners also to read, and maybe I can add something additional as a content. It can always act as a filler. But yeah, that it kind of gives a very good idea how the things, how the market was back in that time, and to compare it with today's time. So it's like not very different. It's the human psyche and the patterns to repeat. I think that's a little bit of a conclusion, but I would not say it more again. Again, like I want to check one more thing. How much time, or like what caused the regulations to come into place? Was it the influence of other countries in Europe, where Czech was taking example from, or how did it become stable? Like what was the journey where the taxations came in place, the regulations came into place? Was it a push from the Europe, or was it initiative from Czech? Was there any resistance from people? Maybe because some people were making money, right? And if they had to, get into the regulated market, they would be unhappy about it. So was there any kind of resistance or some kind of protest? Just if you can give some idea about that.
So the point about like being resistant to regulation. So first point was usually these when people made money on some like loopholes or non-existing regulation, it was a one-time thing. Like they did their scam, and then they don't care anymore. They go away with their fortune. Second point is kind of that. Yeah, maybe if somebody was like making their money on a loophole, then probably they were kind of interested in having it regulated, and they could try maybe to have the regulation go a bit their way, and then there was some lobbying going on and some political influencing, and my mom wants to make a third point also, that like she doesn't want our listeners or viewers to have the feeling that like everything got stolen,
No, I think that's more as an education. I think we are targeting here to learn, but definitely it's not the impression. But maybe you can.
Yeah, I mean there were some big like affairs, but there was also like a lot of times. At the same time, there was foreign companies entering the market, which were sort of teaching the people how stuff is normally done. So I think that kind of explains your earlier question about like, if the influence for regulation was coming from the outside. So in this sense, it kind of was. And at the same time, in the background, there were another big things happening politically. So we started off being Czechoslovakia, and then we changed to the Czechoslovak Federative Republic because the Slovakians wanted to have more autonomy. So at that point, we were a federation of the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and that lasted for 3 years or so. And after that, the definitive split between the Czech Republic and Slovakia came, and this was all happening in the background. Like also big changes. For example, for the Slovaks, it was even more difficult because they had to establish like all the bureaucracy, because that was concentrated in the Czech Republic, and they had to basically create a new currency for themselves because previously we were using like the Czech crown, so they had to make the Slovakian crown. And all the other stuff that comes with the state, like flag, right, the anthem. By the way, I think jsem někde četl jakoby, že my jsme se domluvili, že tu předchozí vlajku nebude nikdo používat, my jsme si ji nechali. By the way, like, there was a deal.
Lidi rozdělit. Udělat hranici, vymyslet hranici a
rozdělit. The border had to be made, like
říct tomu, ty seš Čech, ty seš Slovák.
I think there was even like you know, like a split in like the trains, like something like I think like the Czech Republic got 2/3 of the trains and Slovakia got 1/3. Then also we made a deal that nobody is going to use the previous flag, you know, that we were going to get a new flag, but if you're now using, the Czech Republic is still using the old flag, so we didn't keep that
třeba
promise.
sportovní mužstva, nevím, byli jsme, že výrazný v hokeji a teď se udělalo, to se rozdělilo, to strašný věci se
Yeah, I
dělo.
mean, sports teams got divided, everything like that, so.
Why Slovakia was actually getting lesser proportion, and a very important thing for our listeners to have some context, at what point were Czech and Slovakia different? How did they come together, and how different are the people?
So yeah, that's an interesting topic, but I think it's for a longer discussion. So for now, I'm gonna answer it for how I understand it, and then maybe we can get my mom's opinion the next time.
Yeah, it will leave a lot of listeners curious as well, you know, and also, for example, myself, I don't know very clearly, you know, very black and white, what's the difference, and why was the disproportion, you know, when the country was divided basis on the people, you know, why it was 1/3 for them and, you know, rest for the Czech.
So my understanding is that we were kind of always two separate people, but we joined together so that, because before the First World War, like us and Slovakians were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which fell apart at the end of the Second World War, and at that point we kind of joined together so that we could have our own state. Because at that point, like also a lot of Germans were living in the same area. So we came together with the Slovaks and we said like we're one people and now we have a majority in this area, so this will now be our state. And then we existed in the same state together, but like the Slovakians were always getting sort of like a bit of a worse treatment. They were like always considered to be like the junior, you know, sort of nation. So their country was at that point, I mean, maybe it still is, like the Czech lands were traditionally very industrialized and the Slovakian lands were more agricultural, so they were basically like the poorer country, so that's also why they get a lot less stuff when we split. And they got worse treatment, and at some point they thought, we'd rather have our own state than you know, being the junior partners, and that's why we split.
And I think still like Slovakia is more into agriculture, if I understand it. It's not like the leading industry nation.
Yeah, I would say compared to us, probably still not. Like I'm not, you know, I don't know the facts for sure, but yeah, it also comes with their geography. They're like very mountainous country, so for them, like, they traditionally have like a lot of sheep herding and, you know, this kind of stuff.
Okay. And when the Czechoslovakia was one country, was there harmony between the two people, or was it like neutral? Okay.
Well, I mean that there was harmony between us. I think always, and even now, like I think everybody, or most people think that like, the Czechs can understand why the Slovaks wanted to leave, and we're like, we wish you the best, and you're like still our brothers, you know. So my mom says that like, for her, it was kind of emotional and brutal. Like she felt like, you know, it's like losing a leg if you like lose Slovakia. This is like part of the country, but on the other hand, like everybody's very happy that like there was no civil war or something like that.
Protože udělali hranici, že ty jsi musel ukazovat pas, když jedeš na Slovensko, že to bylo
so like for example, it's like, you know, before you could go to Slovakia freely, and now there's a border and you have to show your passport, and you know that felt bad.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I think I basically listening and understanding this thing, it's incredible to know that the two countries were at harmony. There was never a civil war, and the people had understanding, even though they were from two different backgrounds. The world perceived it as, you know, senior or junior, maybe. I'm not sure how Czech people were doing, perceiving it, but like as I
No.
understood from you, like it was.
When I said the senior engineer, there was more like internally, like the Czech people, like, or like the Czech government always like considered like the Slovakia to be the poorer part of the nation. And maybe to add context for like listeners who are not aware, like the fact that we can get along so well is that like we're culturally very similar, and the languages are mostly like they're mutually intelligible for most people.
No, ale lidi jsou jako hodně zkombinovaní.
Yeah, and
Jsou
also
vlastně
there was
rodiny.
like a lot of like intermarriage and cultural exchange going on. So that's how we were able to get along so well. Yeah.
So historically, like it was always connected, and
No tak ono třeba, že na vojnu, Češi chodili na vojnu na Slovensko, na tu povinnou, že jo, a Slováci většinou do Čech, takže tím pádem, že jo, ty lidi se tam našli v mládí někoho a brali se, že to bylo hodně nejčastější.
Yeah, so there was like a lot of one of the example of like where the cultural exchange was happening, that like for Czech guys who did their like mandatory military service, they usually got sent to a garrison in Slovakia and the other way around, and then maybe even the guy is in the garrison, like he finds a nice like local girl and they get married, and that's how that happened.
And I think everywhere you see such examples. There is a part of the country which is people call there are mostly peasants or farmers, and the other one consider themselves as industrialists. You can see it also in Netherlands. The southern part is considered mostly like farmers, but like it has very much diversity right now. It's not, but maybe historically it was also similar. So kind of goes similar in the pattern.
Yeah.
But I think that we had a really good discussion of post communist times, including the markets, businesses, and then also the people who were the part of that country, Czech and Slovakia, and a bit of understanding, which we have not got into the details, but probably will connect and do it in the future. But again, thanks for your time. It was wonderful. Do you want to add something more, or shall we wrap up?
For me, I'm good. Just like thank you.
Thanks again for your time. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's really good.
Okay.
Thank you, and
Thank
see you
you.
again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.